After absorbing the abilities of 36 mutants, the real mastermind behind the zombie tide, Yuan Kongye, also reached the infamous level 5 Epsilon superhuman. However, this level of unimaginable power was achieved with her secret finally exposed, making her and the entire Snow Worship sect the enemy of all the other major forces in Tianhai City, the investigation team and the Jiangnan region by extension. As the group reached the entrance of the abandoned building, the mutant guard in front of the building immediately raised his hand and told them to stop. Everyone, this is a restricted place of the Snow Worship sect. You are not allowed to. Before he could finish speaking, Kong Shang appeared in front of him like a ghost, grabbed his neck and squeezed slightly. Don't make noise. The guy rolled his eyes and seconds after, he passed out. Zhang Yi and the rest walked straight inside the abandoned building. The abandoned building was still full of bloody brilliance, and the branches and vines of the blood vines were crawling all over the corners. However, since they came during the day, the scene in front of them was clearer and more shocking but expected. At this time, there were more corpses hanging on the ceiling and walls. After all, nearly 10,000 people died in the recent battle at this camp. So all those corpses had become the best nutrients for the blood vines. There was also a gloomy and weird atmosphere everywhere. Even if it was not the first time, some people still felt creeped out as a chill went down their spine. The dead are not scary, but what is scary is this weird and ominous scene that is almost like a religious ceremony. Xiao Honglian couldn't help asking Zhang Yi, "Where is the evidence you mentioned?" Actually, during their time there, Xiao Honglian also secretly took away the things hanging on the wall and studied them, but later found out that they were just ordinary shriveled corpses, drained of all nutrients. Therefore, they were not the root cause of the zombie tide. Zhang Yi turned slightly and said with a serious expression, "At the beginning, I also had doubts. We studied these corpses and the branches and leaves of this blood vine, and found nothing similar to the zombie virus." He glanced at everyone. "But I soon realized that they deliberately let us know. At least you have all secretly spied here, haven't you? If there is really a big secret, they can't be so lax in defense. Think about it. Do you think that a place where we can come and go freely is really as simple as it seems?" Everyone looked at each other and tacitly moved their eyes away. That's right, they took the opportunity to help defend the sect and sneaked in here and took samples for research. Everyone soon came to the main body of the blood vine. The huge blood-red plant like a world tree stood upright, rooted deep in the earth, and the top of the abandoned building was above its head. Then, the branches and leaves spread from the ceiling of the highest floor, covering every space in the building. Zhang Yi continued lightly. "Zombies like to live in dark and humid underground. This is the preference of the viruses that live in their bodies. So it can be concluded that the breeding environment of this virus must be the same. And in the entire Tianhai City, the scientific research sites that meet such an environment have long disappeared. Then, there is only this place." Zhang Yi pointed to the underground where the blood vine roots were, and his eyes became sharp in an instant. This was his guess, but after combining various fragmented clues, this guess has become a realistic idea recently. And he came here this time to verify this idea. After hearing what Zhang Yi said, everyone couldn't help but look at the location of the blood vine's roots. Bailey Chongqing frowned, stepped forward, and then punched the ground fiercely. With a dull bang, the ground was instantly broken, and large pieces of cement and soil flew everywhere, swept in all directions by Bailey Chongqing's fist wind. Zhang Yi and his team couldn't help but take a few steps back, using various methods to avoid the flying soil and rocks. Soon, when the dust settled, everyone hurried forward to observe whether Zhang Yi's so-called evidence appeared. The next moment, everyone's eyes widened, and there was an extremely shocked look in their pupils, and there was a hint of fear surging. The roots of the blood vine, densely packed roots, have been spreading, and it is unknown how much land has been covered. And at the end of these roots, fruits are produced like peanuts. The fruit is surprisingly one corpse after another. Humanoid corpses covered with white hair, and huge, bronze corpses. Some have almost completed the transformation, while others are still in the process of transformation, still retaining the appearance of their former human bodies. Everyone was familiar with them. Aren't they the corpse kings and bronze-armored corpses that they had fought before? Unexpectedly, they all grew from the same tree. No, to be exact, they were cultivated, because it is clear that some of them still retain human characteristics and are transforming into zombies. So the root of the disaster is here. These snow-worshipping cult, you damn bastards. After understanding the truth, Xiao Honglian clenched her teeth and roared angrily. Not only her, but everyone present was filled with anger. If this was a natural disaster, it would be fine, they could only bear it. But this is a man-made disaster, and it is a long-planned, despicable and shameless man-made disaster. Since the end of the world, the snow worship sect has suffered the most casualties. Yuan Kongye and Zhang Yi used the sacrifices of ordinary people to gain the trust and sympathy of other forces. At this time, everyone who understood everything felt that they were being played around by the snow worship sect, like a group of fools. If Zhang Yi had not exposed this conspiracy in time, what would the consequences be? Just thinking about it is enough to make everyone feel cold. It was at this moment that the other leaders of the various forces knew that once the investigation team left Tianhai City, Yuan Kongye and Zhang Yi will reveal their true faces and then eliminate them in one fell swoop. The thought of being targeted by a giant python was not a pleasant feeling. Despicable and shameless villains. There are people in this world who can be so cruel that they even plot against their own people. Although no one in the investigation team spoke, their faces were terribly gloomy. The death of Bian Junwu was a huge pain for them. Now that they happen to find out that the person who killed their captain has always been by their side. They also can't stand the feeling of being fooled. Bailey Chongqing slowly raised his head, squinted his eyes, and had a weird smile on his face. Suddenly he opened his mouth, showing his white teeth as he continued to smile. These guys really set up a big game and fooled us all, but I don't like to be fooled by others. None of us do. I'm going to kill them. We're going to kill all those bastards. The fierce killing intent began to spread around. After everyone present knew the truth, they all wanted to kill the people of the snow worship sect. Some people did it for their comrades, some for their families and friends, and some purely for the loss of their own forces. In short, now they have a common goal, which is to kill the person who played everyone. Although justified, everyone, with the exception of Zhang Yi, were seething with uncontrolled rage. They were all blinded with it to the point that it was not certain whether they were going to wipe out everyone. But one thing was for sure, and thus the snow worship sect would cease to exist when they were done. Zhang Yi looked at the murderous crowd and didn't say anything, but there was a gleam of light in his eyes, and he had a deeper plan in his mind. How strong is Yuan Kongye, who has absorbed so many mutants' abilities that no one can estimate? Zhang Yi knows that she is very strong, but she is definitely not strong enough to ignore other mutants. And if that's the case, she would not have to look at the face of the Jiangnan region. Also, what about after getting Bian Junwu's ability? How high will her threat index be? Everyone's anger value is maxed out, so no matter how strong Yuan Kongye is, we all have a chance to test her. Let's wait and see, Zhang Yi said to himself. Bailey Chongqing carried his huge knight's lance and turned to walk outside. When he passed by the explosives expert Yi Jikong, he gave him a deep look. Old Yi, destroy this plant. Such a root of evil cannot be left. In fact, make sure nothing is left standing. Yi Jikong nodded that he understood. Leave it to me, he replied. The blood vine is the real mother of zombies. Only by destroying it can the zombie tide in Tianhai City disappear completely. Bailey Chongqing strode out of the abandoned building with high spirits, and the other members of the investigation team followed him. The people from several major forces followed them without any hesitation. Now everyone does not need to communicate with words about what to do. The culprit who caused Tianhai City to be almost destroyed must die. Zhang Yi also followed behind everyone silently. Before leaving, he looked back at Yi Jikong. Yi Jikong walked up to the blood vine and stretched out his hand to press on it. A golden light flashed by, and a strange black thing with an octopus-like shape appeared on the blood vine. A person with the ability to release energy. It seems that he has the ability to condense energy and turn it into explosives that can explode at a fixed time. Zhang Yi didn't look at it for long. Staring at other people's superpower research can easily give people an offensive feeling. He just committed Yi Jikong's ability to memory, and then followed Bailey Chongqing and the others out. Not long after, a violent explosion suddenly sounded in the building. Then, the entire abandoned building collapsed. Yi Jikong walked out of the smoke of the explosion with a calm face. At this time, the remaining followers of the sect were startled by the loud noise and appeared outside. They watched the abandoned building slowly collapse, and then looked at Bailey Chongqing and other murderous people, and they were afraid to step forward. Bailey Chongqing didn't even look at them, carrying the knight's lance and walked towards St. John's Cathedral. Some of the believers saw this scene and mustered up the courage to step forward to stop them. If you want to see the leader, you must notify us first. Immediately after, a huge black shadow flashed in the air, and the bodies of those people turned into a residual shadow in the air and disappeared instantly. Zhang Yi only saw a large group of blood mist erupting in the air. Bailey Chongqing's speed of attack was so fast that even he couldn't see it clearly. But a few seconds later, a sound of breaking came from the wall of a building hundreds of meters away. From a distance, two huge pools of blood appeared on the wall. It was like a mosquito being slapped to death on the wall. Liang Yu stared at Bailey Chongqing's back and cautiously reminded Zhang Yi. This man is so strong. He's equivalent to at least 3 Ling Fongs, or even higher. In the past, in the eyes of Zhang Yi and others, Ling Fong was synonymous with a perfect warrior, because his speed, strength, and agility were all maxed out. But this was the first time they saw a powerful warrior who could completely surpass Ling Fong in the field of strengthening. When all the truth has been revealed, a war is absolutely inevitable. Both sides have lost something very important. Precious people, precious resources. These things are worth their lives. Or in Zhang Yi's case, fighting in order to be left alone to enjoy a peaceful life. Separated by a gate, the atmosphere between the two sides has been tense like a bowstring that will break at the touch. Zhang Yi's eyes were fixed on the interior of the church. A few distance away, only a few combatants and the most devout believers gathered nearby out of curiosity. But most of the believers who had no fighting power huddled in their houses nervously, like ostriches, not daring to see what happened. Among them was Li Jian and his wife. "Son, are you watching this? Your dad has avenged you, because today the lunatic Yuan Kongye is going to die." Li Jian said this with a crazy look in his eyes. Led by Bailey Chongqing, Xiao Honglian, Xing Tian, Zhang Yi, and the rest. A total of more than 30 mutants gathered here. They stared at the black gate decorated with sacred patterns, but no one rushed in rashly. Wu Di took a step forward, and a huge ball of light appeared all over his body. Then, like a sharp sword, the floating cannon blasted towards the door of the church. In a flash, a loud boom ranged out, and with that, the door of the church was shattered. The moment the door was broken, the group saw the scene inside. In front of the altar, Yuan Kongye was sitting on the steps, holding the dead Jing Yixin in her arms. After seeing Yuan Kongye, Wu Di's eyes burst into strong hatred. To him, Bian Junwu was like a father. And once Bian Junwu died, he would blame anyone who caused this result. Of course, the one he hated the most was the leader of the snow worship sect. "Go to hell," Wu Di loudly declared. He stood in the front, and hundreds of light balls appeared around him at the same time, reflecting him like a god. The dense floating cannons shot out like a storm, carrying the terrifying power to destroy everything. At this time, Yuan Kongye finally raised her head and looked at them, and her eyes were as cold as an iceberg that had not melted for millions of years. A strong hatred radiated from her. Yuan Kongye was absolutely pissed at this moment, and this was because the last person in this world she could trust was dead. When Wu Di's floating cannon approached her, Yuan Kongye placed Zhang Yixin's body on the ground and slowly stood up. Then, within 10 meters of her, an invisible barrier suddenly appeared, and all the floating cannon were blocked by this invisible force. The powerful floating cannon almost destroyed the church, but it could not cross her telekinesis wall. Zhang Yi reminded everyone. "She has at least dozens of superpowers. Everyone should be careful." Xiao Honglian's eyes were filled with murderous intent. "No matter how powerful she is, I don't believe that the power of all the mutants in Tianhai City can't kill her." Her whole body had long been covered with red flames, and dark red lines like magma flowed on the surface of her skin. She quickly ran in another direction and spit out a huge fire dragon towards Yuan Kongye. No one needs to be ordered deliberately. The mutants present here are the elite among the elites who can survive until now and know how to fight and cooperate. The crowd divided into 3 directions and used long-range attack abilities to attack Yuan Kongye. The melee-type enhancement and orc ability users were ready to wait for Yuan Kongye to show an opening and rush up to give her a fatal blow. All kinds of superpowers flew towards Yuan Kongye like a torrential rain. However, no matter what kind of attack she faced, Yuan Kongye's face remained unchanged. There seemed to be a spherical field outside her body, which could block any attack. In Zhang Yi's eyes, white light was flickering. He really wanted to know whether his divine power could break through Yuan Kongye's mental barrier. But this is his trump card, which cannot be used easily. He must wait until the right opportunity appears. But at this moment, Yuan Kongye's body suddenly floated slowly into the air. She looked down at everyone from above like a god descending to the world. The believers of the sect in the distance saw this scene, and they immediately started to praise their leader excitedly, shouting the name of Snow God over and over and over again. They believed that what they were witnessing was the blessing of the Snow God. And currently, their leader had finally been worthy of being the human body of the Snow God. But Yuan Kongye was using Zhang Yixin's ability at that moment, and Zhang Yi noticed. Zhang Yixin's telekinesis is very powerful. The most enviable thing is that he can control his body and get rid of the control of gravity to achieve high-speed flight. However, now this ability has appeared in Yuan Kongye. The so-called Ice Soul was completely a huge trap to cut leaks. So, Yuan Kongye's great mercy in granting anyone the opportunity to awaken their superpowers was all a lie. and now it was on display. However, it seems none of the believers present seemed to notice. At this moment, Yuan Kongye, suspended in midair, looked down at all living beings like a god. She remained motionless despite all kinds of superpowers attacking her. Wu Di simply couldn't believe his eyes. His floating gun was more powerful than a sniper rifle, and even close to the power of a real rocket launcher. But why was Yuan Kongye able to take on so many floating cannons so easily? Zhang Yi realized that something was wrong and quietly retreated behind everyone. Yuan Kongye looked at them and said coldly, "Foolish and insignificant people, you don't understand what kind of existence you are fighting against. I am the apostle of God in the world, the messenger who exercises divine power. All acts of blasphemy against divine authority must be punished by heaven." After she said that, she suddenly opened her arms slowly. "Let me cleanse this world without faith." As her arms began to rise, the ground under the feet of everyone suddenly began to tremble violently. Zhang Yi and the others were unstable and almost fell to the ground. Cracks appeared on the ground, like an earthquake. In Zhang Yi's surprised eyes, the ground began to float up. Zhang Yi had already turned on the eightfold speed, and his figure retreated like a ghost. Others also felt something was wrong and moved away from Yuan Kongye's position. However, all the surrounding buildings were collapsing, the ground was breaking, and huge rocks rose into the air, like meteorites all over the sky. Such a powerful ability made the pupils of every mutant present shrink. They knew that Yuan Kongye was very strong, but they didn't expect her to be this strong. They had seen this kind of world-destroying power an hour ago. Unexpectedly, they're seeing it again so soon. A level 5 powerhouse. The power of the Epsilon-level mutant. After absorbing the abilities of Bian Junwu and Zheng Yixian, Yuan Kongye successfully broke through to this level. Yuan Kongye looked at everyone with cold eyes and pressed down hard with her right hand. The huge rocks in the sky smashed towards the people on the ground like meteors. Countless boulders rose high into the sky and then quickly fell to the ground in the horrified eyes of the crowd. Within a radius of several kilometers, this was an indiscriminate attack, like a meteor shower. But it was not beautiful, but full of the horror of destruction. Bailey Chongqing laughed loudly, and the huge knight's lance in his hand danced like a windmill. Facing the boulders that kept falling from the sky, he used his lance to pick them up and fly them out. Those were boulders weighing several tons or even dozens of tons. Not to mention people, even if a truck was hit, it would be crushed into a discus. But Bailey Chongqing relied on his powerful strength and his powerful spear skills to make them deviate from their original trajectory. He stood in front of everyone and did not retreat a step, because at this time Bian Junwu was already dead, and he was the captain of the investigation team. He had to protect the team members from wind and rain. Seeing that it was too late to dodge, the others, who were trying to get to a safe area, started to try their best to resist with their own abilities. Zhang Yi was the easiest to deal with this kind of attack. His dimensional gate opened, and no matter how huge the rocks were, they would just disappear silently into another dimension. Compared to the two of them, the others looked much more embarrassed. Xiao Honglian's fire attack had little effect on the boulders. She could only use the purgatory furnace to strengthen her body and quickly dodge in the meteor shower. But the rocks flew through the air, and the boulders fell one after another, making her extremely embarrassed. Many mutants were hit by the boulders because they could not dodge in time, and they did not even have the chance to scream, and they turned directly into a pool of meat paste. "Everyone, come to my side and stay behind me," Zhang Yi shouted to everyone. At this moment, in order to deal with Yuan Kongye, everyone's strength must be gathered. If everyone else was killed, Zhang Yi would be alone, and he had to try his best to protect these people, for now at least. Seeing Zhang Yi easily block the rain of boulders with his dimensional gate, the others immediately gathered in his direction. Once as enemies, they hated Zhang Yi's space ability. But now as comrades on the same front, this ability gave them a great sense of security. Everyone quickly ran behind Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi opened a huge dimensional door and blocked it above his head, like a big umbrella, so that the raindrops would not fall on everyone's heads. But the raindrops were not water, but boulders that could turn people into meat paste. However, they could hide under the dimensional door, but some people had no way to avoid it. They were ordinary believers and mutants of the Snow Worship sect. When they first saw Yuan Kongye display her magical means, they all rejoiced and were extremely delighted. But Yuan Kongye's attack was indiscriminate, covering them as well. They were defenseless and were wiped out in an instant. As of now, everyone, including the remaining mutants of the sect, are no longer of any extra value. It would be better to let them return to the kingdom of God, and then their power will be gathered on Yuan Kongye. Zhang Yixian is dead, and Yuan Kongye must win this battle. Only in this way can they build a world without filth. Come back to where you belong, Yuan Kongye said lightly, and all the mutants killed but had taken her ice soul at some point returned to her. Everyone, including any of the believer currently alive at a safe distance, saw the current demise of their fellow worshippers and were shocked greatly. Seeing Yuan Kongye kill all those believers together with her enemies, their faith completely collapsed. How could this happen? Why is the leader killing the devout believers as well? Some cried desperately, and others could only grit their teeth but do nothing other than to quickly retreat to avoid the attack of the boulders. It turns out that Yuan Kongye was not a savior at all, but a devil. A lunatic to be exact. Yuan Kongye ignored all of them, but her eyes were as cold as the extremely cold snow. Fortunately, her attention was on Zhang Yi and the others at this time, and she did not deliberately wipe them out. Otherwise, with her current strength, killing the three of them would be a piece of cake. Yuan Kongye lowered her head and stared at Zhang Yi, and whispered, "I want your spatial power too." She slowly raised her hand like a god, stretched out her hand and aimed at Zhang Yi and the others. Above the ground, the boulders that had already fallen shook violently, and then rose into the air again, turning into a huge storm of rocks around Zhang Yi and the others. There were flying boulders in all directions, and Zhang Yi and the others were in the center of the storm. Zhang Yi's eyes condensed. His dimensional gate could only open two at the same time, and it was impossible to defend all directions. Yuan Kongye's telekinesis was many times stronger than Zheng Yixian's. They are not even on the same level at all. Not even a little. Is this the end for us? He questioned himself with a gritted teeth.